We bring the, we close the closed portion of the meeting, open the public portion of the Cross Lake City Council meeting, Tuesday, January 27th, 2015. We'll start with the third item on the agenda. Is David Drown here? We have a memo dated January 16th from Briggs & Morgan, our bond counsel, re the post-issuance compliance policies and procedures. Does Mr. Drown want to speak to this before we move ahead?
I'm certainly willing to. Mayor, Council, it's good to meet you. I'm familiar with Briggs's post-compliance policy stuff. The problem with it is, I mean, it has pluses and minuses. The good thing is if the council has policies in place that are adopted, should the IRS question you about the existence of such policies, you have the ability to say, sure, we've got them and we adopted them, and that's arguably a positive. On a negative side, as I read through them, I would challenge most city lay people to fully comprehend what they mean. And I'm always a little hesitant to adopt policies that nobody can understand. So there's some pluses and minuses about that. Having those policies adopted makes some sense in terms of dealing with the IRS and future situations, which is unlikely. It might be useful to, if you adopt those policies, to perhaps somebody write a Peter Rabbit English memo, writing a page or so, that might kind of explain exactly what that means and what's important in there. And if that's something you'd like us to do as a part of this process, we'd be happy to do that.
I'd like to hear a little of it if we could. I'd read through it, and he's right. It's well, and I had grandkids there while I was doing it, so it was a little harder yet to comprehend what was going on. It sounds to me like we don't actually have to do it. It's just recommended, and the major benefit to the city in having it in place is if we did do something wrong, our fines and penalties would be roughly half, is what I saw. Other than that, we're not really compelled to do it.
That sounds right.
Okay.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, David, in your experience, have cities adopted, as Little Falls, did we adopt this thing, or?
I'm certain Mary suggested that Little Falls adopt policy, and I'm pretty confident that they did.
Yeah, we probably did. Mary Ipple is a well-regarded bond counsel in the state of Minnesota, has been doing the work an awful long time. I mean, she makes the recommendation, and I'm sure she's trying to cover the city and protect us as best she can. But it's not required that you do it. It seems to me it provides some level of protection just in case there's a problem, which I don't foresee a problem, but maybe David's right as far as trying to understand them and figure out what exactly the IRS rules mean in this regard is an issue as well.
Well, I do think there are 3 or 4 things that are probably important for staff, particularly to understand. And the rest of that is a lot of language that is pretty difficult to understand.
I spoke with Mike the other day trying to ask him if there was anything I should know about these pages of things that we're all not, perfect on. Was there not a question, too, of tax exempt status from the IRS if certain things aren't adopted for the investors to just ensure that with these bonds, or am I mixing this up with something else?
I doubt there's any action that the city, well, actually, it's conceivable the city could take some action that would jeopardize the tax exempt status of bonds, okay? The easiest example might be if you were in the housing business and you're supposed to be renting to low-income families and you rented to millionaires. That's the type of action that would be prevented under IRS rules, and that kind of activity might get you in trouble and lose the tax exempt status of those bonds, which would make your bondholders pretty unhappy with you. I doubt there's much potential in the activities that the city's engaged in now, where you run that kind of risk.
The question, is there anything contained in this document that we don't do already or are not in compliance with? Shar or Dan?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, you got to file the 8038 or whatever that is, or,
And your bond counsel files your 8038 for you. If you have significant events, there are continuing disclosure issues that you do right now. So to some degree, you do what that memo says. Do you have policy that says you do it? No. And to some degree, you have people that help you comply with those policies right now.
We don't get in any trouble by adopting this, in other words, or we probably prevent some issues.
I don't see any negatives, and I see some potential small positives
In adopting it.
in adopting it,
Okay.
yes.
Somebody want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion that we, before I make the motion, I'll ask very clearly again, Mr. Drown, you recommend that we do it? Not highly recommend, but recommend.
Yes.
Okay, I'll
Perfect
make the
answer.
motion that we adopt this.
I'll second.
Okay.
Any comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Drown. Any, Mike Lyons has got a comment in here as well.
Where's my, there he is.
Mr. Chairman, I think item B, probably David should be back up and just go through the refunding. You did get the memo from Mike on it, but I think this is David's show right now, so.
Well, this won't be a big show. I'm going to pass a handout that I'm pretty certain isn't in your packet, but it simplifies this greatly, if I might, Mayor. While that's going around, for the last several weeks, we've been working on a transaction to refund the city's bond issue that's outstanding associated with the telecommunications business. In round numbers, there's about $2.5 million worth of debt outstanding.
Here we go, Mike.
Oh, there we go. There we go. This is a schedule that shows what's important here. If you look at the 3 columns to the right there, showing the new debt service, the new payments on the new refunding bonds, compared to the payments on the existing bonds. The difference in payments is shown on the right side. And as you can see, the payments on the new bonds are in round numbers about $60,000 a year less than the old bonds. How come? Because you took a higher interest rate, knocked it down to a lower interest rate. So by proceeding with this refunding, after all expenses, your future bond payments on the telecommunications system will drop by an average of about $65,000 a year. Over the remaining 7 years, your savings would be $452,000. Now, there's a little bit of misleading numbers in there. The city does have a debt service reserve fund on the existing bond issue. That's $450,000 that sits out of your hands in reserve in case it's needed to make a bond payment. With the new issue, we don't have to have $450,000 outstanding. That debt service reserve can be dropped to about $250,000. So $200,000 of cash is used to reduce the size of the refunding bond issue. So you have less debt outstanding after you complete this refunding. The net benefit to you in reduction is just about $215,000, the value of the savings associated with completing this transaction. We were engaged to serve as the city's financial advisor in this transaction, which means our job is to look out for your interest, make sure the deal was done properly, and make sure that the underwriters are playing the game fairly. You worked with Baird and Company, and their initial proposal on this transaction, quite candidly, was very attractive. It was much better than I would have expected it to be. Throughout this transaction, their perspective on interest rates didn't change, and the pricing process that was completed at the end of last week was exactly what we'd expect in the marketplace. So the proposal to buy these refunding bonds from you from Baird, and our judgment was excellent, certainly at or better than market, and the savings are consistent with what you were told to expect a number of weeks ago when you started this process. So from my perspective, it's a good transaction, and I would recommend that the council put its stamp of approval on this, and there's a resolution for you to pass to accomplish that.
How much of that reserve becomes available to the communications company
In round numbers,
in round numbers?
$200,000. And it's not available to the communications company. We asked them if they wanted that to increase their cash balance, and their statement was, no, let's pay off $200,000 worth of debt. So the new bond issue is smaller.
But that's not reflected in this schedule.
It is. If you look at the gross savings, there is the old debt service, which is a $455,000 negative number. The new reserve, which is 248, the difference between those two numbers is about 200,000. That's the way this schedule was put together. But big picture, you took a reserve fund, reduced it by 200 grand, took that money and paid off some principal.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right.
Mr. Chairman and David, the action of the council then is the adoption of the resolution providing for the issuance and sale of the 2.485 telephone utility revenue refunding bond series 2015A.
Thank you. That would be the
That's
action.
it.
sir.
Okay, that's in your packet on the third page.
I will so move.
I second.
Motion Wessel, second Nelson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, and the next couple items, we talk about capital expenditures and equipment certificates and such. I asked Mr. Drown to stick around a little bit longer so that if there's questions you have with regards to how equipment certificate works and also how capital funding might work for road projects or anything else we're doing, I asked him to stick around for a little bit longer so that maybe we could answer any questions you might have with regards to that I can't answer.
Thank you, Dan.
If you don't mind, I'll just move on into number 4, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Okay, we've talked about this item a lot over the last couple of months, really as the kind of the budget process has gone on. And excuse me, if we're down to the point where due to some, various financing options and funding and cost situations that exist with regards to the equipment that we're looking at purchasing, a decision needs to be made one way or the other. And if you decide to go forward with kind of the plan that we had talked about, there's a number of items that need to, that we've added as item B, A, B, C, and well, D really isn't, but we have item E as well, the bid opening on the loader. Anyway, if I can go back again, we've got about $338,000 available that you have in funding for various items. We talked about purchasing or using about $575,000 in equipment certificates, which would payable over 4 years, not to exceed $150,000 in payments for those 4 years to replace a piece of fire apparatus, replace a loader in the Public Works Department, and if sufficient funding was available, to replace a tractor in the Parks Department. We feel that these purchases would take care of the major equipment other than the equipment that is in your operating budget. You do have capital that is in operating. And by way of that, I mean for instance, item 5, you've got an item that talks about purchasing a pickup truck. That's not included in what we're talking about here. That's something that's already that's in the budget as a capital item, but it's not included in what we're talking about here. So we do have a lot of equipment, like a police cars, and it's already in your budget. This piece of this pickup truck is already in your budget. But these are the big items that are over and above that. It's hard to finance by annual cash a $470,000 piece of fire equipment. It's hard to finance by cash a loader that costs $200,000. So by doing equipment certificates over the next 4 years, we looked ahead, and you can basically take care of your major capital purchases between now until 2019. And you've got the funding to do that. We also looked at the remaining amount of about $188,000 to be used for various other items, and the recommendation of the Public Works, Cemetery, and Sewer Commission was to use it for design plans for the Dream Island Bridge, as well as replacing a portion of the Manhattan Point Boulevard. You do have, and I mentioned at the end of this memo, that you do have funding that's available to do your sewer plant based on some bonds that are ending. And you have $140,000 a year that you'd have after, that'll be available starting in 2016 to do the sewer plant. So the sewer plant is virtually taken off the table. The equipment is really paid for by using this plan. And then you have to figure out, all right, how do we do streets? And David can discuss various street items. And you've got Section 429 under statute that talks about special assessments, but you have to assess at least 20%. Or you do have, as Dave Reese brought up at the last meeting, there is another potential funding mechanism, and perhaps David Drown could explain this a little better. It's under 475 of the Minnesota statute, and that requires a unanimous vote by the council to do the project, and it's also subject to a reverse referendum by the residents. So the residents could petition the city to say, we don't want you to do the project this way. We want to vote on it. If you get that petition of 5%, which is a pretty low threshold, 5% isn't a lot of signatures on a petition. It has to go to the voters, and that won't happen until the election of 2016. So, you know, it's possible to do it without changing your assessment policy to fix these streets, or you have to come up with the cash, or you can use this other method under 475. But excuse me again. Maybe you take this in pieces. Do you want to do the equipment certificates? Do you like the plan that we put together with regards to that? If that's the case, you know, we would turn David loose, I think, again, and do a negotiated sale or something on equipment certificates. He can talk about interest rates and just the general process for an equipment certificate. I think if you go with the equipment certificates, obviously our department heads are interested to know, can they move forward with the purchases. I know on the fire truck situation, we've got a kind of a deadline by the end of the month, otherwise we're going to be paying it's 5 figures, several 5 figures more in cost for that piece of apparatus. I think the loader would end up costing more as well. Ted can talk about that, but that part of it, you know, that takes care of your equipment. Your sewer plant is taken care of with funding over time. You've got the road piece, and the road piece is probably the toughest one. Now, you could take, if you would get the authorization to do the road funding, as I talked about, with a unanimous vote of the council, and you don't have a reverse referendum. I mean, obviously, with $188,000, I mean, you could issue quite a you know, a pretty good chunk of bond issue. I don't know what, David can give me an idea, you know, about that. But if you do a $1 million issue over 10 years, I mean, $188,000 is going to make your payments. The problem with that is it takes time to go through that process under that part of the statute. You've got to have your capital improvement plan done. You've got to have a public hearing on it. And you're already into January. You don't have a meeting until March. To get the projects up and rolling is difficult. I mean, Dave can give you timelines, but it'd be pretty difficult to get a big project rolling by the end of this year. What I would suggest is that, I mean, this money we plan on having in your budget every year. You're going to have your equipment certificate payments every year. You're going to have this $188,000. We don't plan on using it up on other expenses elsewhere. I mean, we plan to keep this, that it's there for capital. I would suggest you take the $188 that's there and you do what the Public Works Commission mentioned. Get the plans and specs done for the bridge, get a chunk of roadway done, and then continue having this discussion about how you're going to handle your roads between now and budget time. Because at budget time, it's going to take more levy to do what has to be, or at least, not what has to be done, at least what's shown on your capital plans. And, Mr. Chairman, and members, I don't know, you can decide how you'd like to handle it, but if you'd like to look at the equipment certificate first, let's get that sized, at least pretty close to how it's going to be handled. David can give you an idea of how equipment certificates work, and if you can go ahead and commit to those purchases. You size the issue based on what the purchases are. You don't size it based on what you think you might want. You got to, you're going to get your dollar amounts. If it's 575 or if it's 562,500, I mean, you don't, say we're going to do 500,000 without having the, knowing what the numbers are. So we're only going to size it based on what's absolutely needed. But I would suggest you do the equipment certificate first, and then, if you take the recommendation of the Public Works Commission, we can, move forward.
Comments, anybody?
Yeah, I appreciate the explanation. It's, at least for myself, things are getting a little clear. And I do agree with you. I think we should handle the equipment certificate first, and then I understand the $188,000 every year, and then the money that's coming off of some debt service that's been satisfied. I think I'd like to continue on these, like a workshop type approach, so we can talk about this again, because I had discussions with Dave Reese today, try to learn some stuff, and then he said, well, road conditions are dependent on the weather you have. So, some could last longer. This year, the roads are going to take a beating because it's been so cold. But I think I would like to see another pass through the roads and trails and try to figure out, do we have to raise taxes? Do we have to, what do we have to do? Because right now, I don't feel good about not having a plan that you can kind of see in the years to come. So, but I think we should take care of this part first, get these people on their way. And the only comment I'd have about this certificate is there's a comment in here that the public can't see, or they could if we'd put it up. It leads me to believe that John Henke may or may not get his requested lawn tractor. And I did talk to Mike about it, but it says in here, buy the loader, buy the fire truck, and then there's a comment about if sufficient funds are available to purchase a new lawn tractor. I think we should just decide what equipment we're going to get so that everybody knows. And it's not left,
If I can, Mr. Chairman, when I wrote that, the reason I wrote it that way, we didn't have bids on the equipment. We didn't know how much we were going to get in revenue from the equipment we sold, because that's kind of the way we sized the equipment certificate. I think based on what we've received, we should be fine. We'd like you to set a not to exceed number. We know that the piece of fire apparatus is $469. Is that a net number? 471. Well, we've got but you've got and you have a sale. You're going to sell the excess equipment. Does that lower that amount?
Depends on how much we sell the truck for, correct?
Yeah. So that's what we're trying to.
The 471 is the gross price of the new equipment.
That's just the new fire apparatus.
Yep, right.
You've got,
And
you've
that
got the
would be
loader.
reduced by whatever we get for the used piece that we liquidate.
Yep.
Is that correct?
And we would, as you see, item A is to go ahead and start the process to sell. So, we would net that out.
Sure.
But John's piece of equipment was it $20,000, $30,000?
He had a roof
33,
replacement.
yeah, the
30
33
something.
in the budget, yeah.
33. So.
I've got a comment. I think we should tackle these one at a time. We've topped it off with the fire apparatus. We've got some sewer plant. We've got the Manhattan Beach patch. We've got roads, and we've got the Dream Island Bridge that I know are quasi-urgent. I think the public should know that if we don't replace the fire equipment that we're talking about, the average property that's worth probably $500,000 would see a $200 to $400 a year potentially increase in their homeowner's insurance, because our fire department very likely will be derated from its current rating of a 7, and this just twists my mind, down to an 8. And that will, for a $500,000 home, that could cost you in homeowner's insurance $200 to $400 a year. It isn't too often that we get to justify in the hands of the homeowner the cost of some of this capital equipment, but I think now that I understand the issue, we're replacing a 20-year-old piece of equipment, we're proposing to, that we can no longer get parts for. And that's the sum and substance that's happening here. And so it might be my recommendation that we approve the replacement and the acquisition of a new piece of fire apparatus, according to our fire chief.
Is that a motion?
Yeah.
No, that was just a...
Recommendation?
A speech.
Councilman Schrupp and I had the privilege of getting a little update, as being the newbies on this council with Mr. Lohmiller a couple of weeks ago, and you get a better insight that I think the general public doesn't have an understanding of, and that's what we all should do before we judge things. Pay me now or pay me later. You just heard the numbers, a couple $100, $300. Well, taxes or insurance on your home, you're going to pay it anyway. That's not even discussing the safety factors. So I agree with the fact that I don't want to be mixing in equipment with roads and bridges, because I got some real comments down the line here. But I totally, you guys have already been moving forward with this equipment. It precedes me, and I don't quite understand maybe all the end loaders and all that, but that's why we had a liaison and still have a liaison to the Public Works, so I don't need to be the expert on that. John was there, I guess, prior, and this conversation started in a previous time period, but I'd like to move forward with the approval of these equipment surpluses, but I certainly don't want to mix it in with some of these conversations down below on Dream Island Bridge and roads. So I'm in favor of now that I better understand, and please understand that when I was here 2 weeks ago, I had some catching up to do. So I just wanted to ask some basic questions on where we'd come from and where we're going, and better understand some of these things, because it is a big chunk of money, and I'm comfortable with that portion of it now. So that's my comment. But yeah, I agree with you, Mayor, that we need to separate out those items below us, but we need to get this done so these people can move forward before it costs the city even more money.
Mr. Mayor, is this set up to make these motions as on the agenda? For instance, 4A would be one motion, and I don't know that that covers all the equipment in this sheet. We have this memo from for the capital outlay items. The first asterisk there, or dot, I guess it's an asterisk, but that would include all the equipment certificates and the equipment. I don't know if that's how this motion up here reads.
What I would suggest is if you're so inclined, the first bullet point, give us authorization to move forward with the equipment certificates for the purchase of the piece of fire apparatus, the loader, and the lawn tractor, and
The Bobcat, I believe,
Bobcat.
Ted.
Bobcat, I'm sorry. I'm not reading this as closely as I should. Bobcat and loader, up to $575,000, and so that we can move forward. And then get that done as a motion. Then if you approve that motion, then you need to do item A, which is to get rid of the piece of fire apparatus. And then you've still got the discussion on Dream Island Bridge and all the others.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now realize that what they just did was approve not only the fire engine, but the Public Works Department equipment transactions.
Mr.
that
Chairman,
right?
yes, that's correct. It would be the four items. I think it had a
Yep.
the Bobcat. Maybe, David, could you, if you wouldn't mind, just a quick explanation of equipment certificates and how they work? I'd like to just make sure that we know that we can move forward with entering into the agreements that need to be entered into, because I know, I mean, Chip's got things ready to go with that piece of fire apparatus and such. I just want to make sure that we're all up to speed on how it works now that we've started the process.
Okay, Mayor, Council, whenever you borrow money, you have to find a statute that gives you the authority to do that. When it comes to equipment, Minnesota laws are pretty flexible and fairly easy, okay? You have the ability to issue equipment certificates. They're little bonds. They do carry the city's full faith and credit general obligation pledge, so the interest rates on them is usually quite low. As long as you repay that debt over a term of not to exceed 10 years, and as long as the annual payments on that debt do not exceed, sorry for the math, 0.25% of the city's tax base, the council can proceed without any process at all, okay? And as I look at your tax base and that ratio, I think you'll be fine. You ought to be able to move forward with equipment certificates. No public hearings, no anything. So, you know, council receives a proposal, you can pass a resolution, and it's done. If the amount of the equipment certificates exceeded 0.25% of your tax base, the payments per year, you would have to go through that reverse referendum process that Dan talked about for street improvements. And the public might have the potential to oppose that, in which case you would be blocked from issuing certificates. But as long as the amount that you're issuing is fairly small, and in your case, that would constitute small, I don't think there's any risk at all that you wouldn't be able to sell them. That would be very easily done. And right now, the interest rate on equipment certificates will probably be a net something like 2%.
How much?
About 2%, maybe even a little bit less.
We'll hold you to that.
That's fine.
David, you would work with us on this and go through the process? Do we need bond counsel in this?
Yeah, I mean, equipment certificates are tax exempt, it's
Yep.
worth the extra cost to get it. We'd probably only look at two approaches. This is a relatively small amount of money paid for very briskly, which means you don't want to spend a lot of money on transaction costs, all right? I'd probably take a look at one of the financing programs that the Minnesota Rural Water Association has outstanding. For $5,000, they will handle all the transaction costs associated with issuing those equipment certificates. And if you look at bonding costs normally, they're a lot higher than that. The other nice thing is the joint powers folks that subsidize my fee for working with you folks will pay half of the transaction costs of microloan fees. So I'll look at the other options, but that's probably the most cost-effective way for you to go. And I'm pretty confident the interest rate on that program on four-year paper right now is under 2%. So it's quick and easy to do. I don't have any concerns about you getting it done. And it can be completed and closed as quickly as a couple of weeks. So whenever if you know the dollar amount that you want to borrow, you can put your debt in place very quickly and easily.
Yeah, I think we have dollar amounts for pretty much everything that we're looking at purchasing. We don't know the net amount yet on that piece of fire apparatus, because you have to, approve item A here to sell that piece of fire equipment, but, and then you would provide whatever documentation that we have to have.
Sure.
Our next meeting is until March 9th, that's why, we've got a bunch of time here, and we continue to move forward. Do you need any authorization from the council for you to go ahead?
The council might consider authorizing staff to submit an application for a rural water loan for equipment purposes, okay? Then that application is processed. We'll run it through the process and get you a binding quote. If that quote looks good, you'll be able to proceed that way. But staff could use the authority to submit an application. It's not binding, it's just gets you a quote.
I can make that motion to authorize staff to make application to Minnesota Rural Water for helping handle these transactions.
I'll second it.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, just one other item under discussion. even though you haven't voted, I know you've got discussion. I just want to make sure that, do you see any problem with us moving forward with the transactions, with the purchases?
No, I think there's
Okay.
virtually zero risks of not being
Okay.
able to do the financing, so
Right.
I see no reason why you cannot safely move forward.
I just wanted to make sure that you knew what we're looking at here, so.
Good. Have a motion? Do you have a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right,
I have one quick comment.
sure.
I don't believe we can get rid of the old fire apparatus till the new one shows up. So you've kind of got to finance the whole amount. I mean, you're not looking at a.
What are you gonna do,
I mean, would somebody
Chip, you
fill
might
me
as
in
well
on
come up
that?
to
I
me.
mean, we don't give up that one until we get the new one, and you don't get the new one without paying for it,
Well, you paid 200 down.
or are we trading it?
No, we won't trade it.
Okay,
You pay down, get them started, half down, and then you pay it when on delivery. But that transaction will happen at the same time.
okay.
We just, to size the issue, we're going to go out for bids right away on that. So to size the issue, we'll know what the amount is we're going to get on the old
I
piece of
just, was
apparatus.
just a
Yep.
thought that, just
Yeah.
like giving up the old car before the new one shows up.
Good point.
Good point, thank you.
Mr. Earl,
Where are we?
would you like a motion on 4A, declare the equipment search?
Are we ready for that?
Also move.
That motion is, why don't you state that motion?
As stated in the memo up here, declare equipment surplus for the, well, it's for the Cross Lake Fire Department, would like to declare the 1996 Freightliner FL80 custom full response engine surplus to use the proceeds of the sale of this apparatus towards transaction for the first line engine 1 custom cab.
Thank you, Mark.
I second.
Motion made by Wessel, seconded by Nelson to declare the existing piece of fire apparatus that we are going to liquidate excess. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Now, where are we?
So, Mr. Chairman, would you mind, just to get this equipment all put together at the same, through the same discussion here, you have an item under 4E, and that was the bid opening for your loader. I'm trying to kind of
is-
keep us on the equipment here.
This is-
You've-
yep.
You had a bid opening today, it was at 4:15. The
Right.
high bid came in from Heavy Iron in the amount of $75,876. We had one other proposal came in at 75,101, and we also had a trade-in value with Ziegler at 75,000. So,
No, I was mistaken. The trade-in value is 77. I just read the contract with the salesman, it's 77. So it's actually worth more to trade in, so,
oh, I'm sorry.
no, that's what I was trying to catch you, Dan, I'm sorry.
Thanks, sorry.
So the,
Darn, I
We'll
had
trade it
my, I
in
had
on
my
the
head
new
down
one.
and didn't see you coming.
yeah, I apologize. It's, we'll trade it in, and is what we'll do when the new one comes.
That works better for trading and timing and everything else,
Works
doesn't it,
much better
Ted?
for the city.
So we will reject the bids that we received and open today at 4 o'clock? Is that the
That'd be great.
process?
Yep, if you do
Do we
that
need
by
to vote on
motion,
that?
Yeah.
Is that your motion?
Need a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second by Hecox. All in favor of rejecting the bids received for the loader?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Since we messed this around, what do we want to attack next?
Probably to B, 4B. Moving down the line.
All right. That's a memo dated from Public Works recommending, with recommendations on the bridge and road project from the last meeting.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, I put up on your screen, or up for people out there, it's the second bullet point that's up on the screen there. That 188,000, is that right?
So what that
Yeah,
is to prepare plans and specs for the Dream Island Bridge and to repair approximately 400 feet of Manhattan Point Boulevard near the intersection with County Road 66. Discussion? Dave. Mr. Reese, our engineer.
I would say we should just look at them one at a time.
That's okay, whatever sequence you want. I will say to you that to me, the Manhattan Beach Point, or Manhattan Point Beach Road is to me, should be a patch and maintenance. But the other ones, the Dream Island Bridge is a more critical issue. David, WSN.
The Dream Island Bridge has been discussed because it's had some recent damage out there from beavers, and it's currently restricted for the amount of axle load that can use it. We've submitted a proposal.
Hard to hear,
Can you hear me?
hard to hear.
Okay. Hear me better now?
That's better.
All right.
Yep.
So the Public Works Commission had WSN take a look at the bridge, prepare a temporary recommendation for fixing that so that it's safe in the interim, and also to provide a proposal for replacement, a design of a replacement bridge. And that's in your packet. The recommendation from the Public Works Commission is to proceed with the preliminary design for the replacement of the bridge, and also, as conditions allow, get out there to do the temporary fix, just to keep the pilings together out there. The preliminary work is leading up to applying for state bridge bond funding, which is a grant program for local bridge improvements sponsored by the county as a pass-through for the state funds. And when you have a bridge that's structurally deficient or functionally obsolete, it becomes eligible for this money. It's a process that you have to go through. You have to complete the plans, submit them to the state for review and approval, and then essentially wait for the state legislature to allocate the funding for the project. If it's ready to go to bid, it'll be eligible for the funding. If it isn't, then you'll wait until the next round. So this is the same process that was followed on Sunrise Island Bridge, and essentially the money comes as a grant to pay for the new bridge costs, and I also believe some right-of-way is eligible for that money. What the city's share of the project cost is the engineering cost and any bypass road construction. So in looking at this project, we haven't gotten into the preliminary design work. The city hasn't authorized that. Yet you're deliberating over the cost of this and your budgeting. So, our best guess at this point is that the city's share will probably be around $100,000 or less at this point in time for the engineering and bypass road.
Did I understand you correctly that if this project were taken to completion, the city's share of the cost, which would be, what'd you say, 100,000? The rest would be grants?
Correct.
Would your design be rectangular culverts?
It's, our estimate for the design is based on box culverts
Yep.
being installed. And I think we were clear in our proposal that if the desires of the city on the type of bridge changes, then we'd have to resubmit, because the design for a different style of bridge would likely involve much more in-depth design.
Should be understood that not only is age being a problem with this bridge, but the beaver are attacking the head wall ends of it as well, rendering the approaches unstable.
Right. And the other thing to be aware of is that the time frame for construction for box culverts is significantly less than, for instance, doing a slab span concrete bridge such as was done for Sunrise Island Bridge, or a timber bridge. So that's a cost factor to weigh.
Mr. Mayor, if I
Do
may.
you have any questions for Dave?
Two questions. A box culvert, currently that culverts, or the bridge that's there is tall enough, snowmobiles can go under it in the wintertime. I've seen people pull boats, small boats, jet skis, fishing boats through there. It's not deep enough to drive them through, but would the box culvert have that same type of height?
We certainly wouldn't want to make it any less than it is right now. We are aware that there's interest of folks that would like to be able to get boats through there on a regular basis, but at this point, we don't know if that's entirely feasible. Part of this preliminary design work is to go out and actually do a survey and see what the elevations of the lake bottom are. We could sink box culverts in there 3 feet below ordinary high water level, but it may all fill back in with sediment and lake bottom fill. So what's actually feasible out there is something that needs to be studied.
Well, that would be I guess, not necessarily that we make it better than it is, just that we don't make it worse.
Correct.
So, and then the other question is, as you, I think, already alluded to with the box culverts, is at Dream Island, we had to build a temporary road for them to use. We're not talking about that here. How long, if there's a fire out there, Chip doesn't want to swim to it. So,
Right.
Garbage trucks and fire engines are always a hassle with bridges.
how long does it take how long would the road actually be closed, impassable?
Well, to set box culverts, from our bridge engineer, I understand it's probably a span of about 2 weeks. But there's, the approach work in addition to that. So, if we're looking at a road closure of 3-4 weeks, potentially,
But would it be passable? I mean, at night, can they,
we would build a temporary road around,
you would do like
One
you did
end.
at Dream Island then?
Yeah.
All right.
similar to what was done for
Okay.
Sunrise Island.
Sunrise, I keep calling it. This is Dream Island.
This is the commission, I actually sat in on my first meeting, and the commission thought that it would be a good thing to get ahead of this, to get some design, because there was questions like yours that came out, and, David doesn't know yet because they haven't done any design work on it. So we thought it'd be a good idea to spend a little money to get an idea of the design, and then be able to go and show the design to the residents so they can see what's coming down the road, and also to go for the grant money. I did have some questions through email today with Dave, and he hasn't done a full-blown estimate on the construction cost. He's just done the engineering. But I think in the email I got, I think you guessed about $250,000 for the whole thing. So if you don't get any state funding, that's what you're looking at. So the commission felt we need to try to get a grant so that we can cut the cost down of this thing, so.
Well, there is a standard grant application for deteriorating bridge structures to help municipalities fund these kinds of things. Is there not, David?
There's a couple of different funding mechanisms available for townships and cities through state aid, local township bridge, and then also the bridge bond account, which is what we're pursuing.
There's no water left under that thing. Just fill it in and pave it. I mean, seriously, it's a little single-lane bridge, $250,000? There's no least expensive way to do that. It's from here to that wall. It's single lane. This blows me away. $250,000.
Well, them beaver are expensive.
Well, seriously, fill it in and pave it, who cares? Well, I know the DNR is going to care, but
The DNR won't let us fill it in.
it's going to remain single lane, though, as simple as can be, minimal.
You would not be able to do the same width of bridge if you're using the state money on this. You'd have to meet their standards, so that's part of the reason why the cost would be what it is, what we're estimating. There's a minimum width required if you're going to use the state's money.
This is what happens when you let lawyers in St. Paul design our roads and bridges.
That's true.
Instead of letting these guys do it.
Mr. Chairman, if I can ask a question, I'm sure, Councilmember Nelson, this isn't the last time you're going to scratch your head about how government works, I'll tell you that. What's the timing? When do you think that this, the bridge might need to be replaced? When, is it a 2015 project, or is this a 2016? If it's a 2015 project, I'm thinking, we better save some money on this $188,000 we're talking about, rather than doing that street project. Otherwise, I don't know how we're going to come up with $100,000, if we get a bunch of other funding.
Well, the design itself is, our complete proposal through construction was around $68,000. That's in your proposal that you have. And that included construction, so I'd say you're probably looking at about half that for the full design process submittal to the state for review. The review process and the bidding process itself, and when the legislature actually fills the cup with funds, that I can't say for sure, but it's looking like probably the soonest would be 2016.
Yeah, okay.
So coming up with $100,000 for your 2015 budget, perhaps not, but
Okay.
perhaps 34 or 35,000 for the engineering.
And there's no real guarantee we're going to get the grant money, right? I mean, grants are never guarantees. So what if you go through all these steps and you don't get the money? Or are you feeling fairly confident that if all these steps are done, the money's going to be there?
The state has set up the program for bridges such as this that are deemed, they've been inspected by the county, and if they're deemed structurally deficient, then they qualify for the grant. So it's just a matter of whether the state has the money to put into the program.
That's all. It's just a question of what the state has the money.
So are we limited to the type of repairs that we could make to that one?
Within practical limits, yeah, I think what we've brought to Ted and the Public Works Commission is a temporary fix. It will make the bridge usable, and, you know, made the comment, it could last another 5 years. It all depends on, you know, what type of loading is put on it. If somebody ignores the restrictions that are placed on it and places a heavy axle loading over it, it could, you know, damage the understructure of the bridge.
In my 10 years of being involved with this stuff, I think I've watched us patch that up twice. And the beavers somehow take it apart, and now the structure, I guess, is also failing according to what I'm hearing. You know, initially it was the end walls and the embankments, but now it's even more. And if you remember how we did Sunrise Island, our engineers predicted that the bridge was close to failure, and we got an old pshaw from everybody, and then the bridge failed. The bolts failed, the bridge started to lean, and things got serious. And then when we said that you could not haul garbage trucks over it, and they no longer had fire protection, because you didn't dare drive one of our fire rigs over it, things started to happen. And I think we're pretty close on this one as well. We should start to move on it. How you like that?
I'm learning as I go along.
It's frustrating.
Yes,
as I-
it is.
As I talked with Ted earlier, growing up on a farm, and I know a lot of farmers have cabins up here for 20 grand, they could make that passable for a long time. But that won't meet any state approvals, we won't get DNR approvals, we won't get state funding, we won't get anything, so it's got to be done the right way. So we're looking for a motion again on this one now, too?
What do you want to do? My recommendation is that we authorize WSN to do a study on it, a preliminary design, so we've got enough to move forward to request a application for funding from the state, a grant. I'll make that a motion.
I'll second it.
If I may ask, that's for the bridge and the road projects, is this
I'm just working on the.
just the
I'm
Dream
working on
Island
the
for now?
Dream Island Bridge
Just
at
Dream-
this
So you're
point.
talking about the 20 grand you're authorizing right now?
Yeah.
Dave, do you think 20's an adequate number today? And if it's not,
That would cover what we've outlined in our proposal for the tasks that we consider preliminary engineering, you know, up through, we have to delineate the wetlands out there, and that can't be done until spring. You know, that's going to take some time.
Okay.
To actually have plans in hand that are
More.
ready to ship to the state, it's probably going to take another $14,000 to $15,000.
So you're saying the total package is 35?
That's what I was stating earlier tonight, is that, you know, our total proposal was for $68,000, and that's through construction. But the first half of that is the design through plans submitted to the state. $20,000 is all that the Public Works Commission was comfortable recommending to City Council to get this thing started and go through preliminary design, so we have enough information to share with residents and get public input and answer some questions.
My motion is that through the 35,000. That's where I am right now, unless you
Okay.
think that, unless the
I'll
council.
second that.
I have a second from Mr. Hecox.
You already had a
comment.
motion and a second.
Well, that's all right.
It's whether or not
All right.
the seconder would agree to the
Amendment.
adjustment of the
Seconder.
motion.
yeah, I'll agree to that with
All
one,
right,
just one
yeah.
question. And if we authorize you up to 35, will that get us to the point where we've submitted some paperwork to the state?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
then that's what we want. At least that's what I
So,
want.
I'm sorry, if I can, just to clarify, is to accept the proposal with the adjustment up to 35,000. That was item C? Yeah, 4C.
Yes.
Okay.
I just have a question, so I better understand this.
You
If,
and me
if,
both.
well, if you have a commission for a reason. So if your commission recommended $20,000 to get preliminary drawings down and to get public input, particularly from the people of the island, because they're the public that's going to matter most, then why are we spending more right now? If that's what your commission recommended, and that's why you have a commission, you know, why, you know,
So the answer to that question is so we know, we get a good idea of what it will cost the city, and we have an idea of what the state will grant us. If we stop short of that, we still don't have enough to present to anybody. We don't know what it's going to cost the city of Cross Lake. Is that reasonable?
I'd say yes. The 35,000 is what we're estimating it will take to do the complete engineering plans and submit that to state aid for review. State bridge engineer. You know, as you may well guess, as you go through public informational meetings and things like that, and you get input from the public, we may get input that the folks out there want an entirely different bridge than what we've, you know, based our design proposal on. And if that's the case, then we need to take a relook at that and see what the design is going to take. If you decide you want to, you know, agree with the residents and change from a box culvert to something else. So just so you understand that.
All right. My motion was for items 1 through 12 on the WSN proposal. Is that correct, Mr. Reese?
We have items 1 through 11.
I got a question from Mr. Vogt as to where this fit, your proposal.
What was the question?
Was it, is it your 1 through 12? That's 85, or 34,824 on your proposal?
Oh, you're an expense.
I'm sorry, what tasks are we proposing to do, complete? Is that what your
Just
question is?
items 1 through 12 is the amount of 34,824, and that's what the council's voting on? Is that correct?
Is that correct?
Starting on
That's
page
correct.
3.
That's
Okay,
correct.
thank you. Now, where's our motion? We have a motion made and seconded by, Mr. Schrupp for items 1 through 12 on the WSN proposal to bring us to grant application. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 What do you say, sir?
I said aye.
Okay,
Late to the game, but
so
aye.
unanimous.
I still think we could hire Ole and Swen and have it done for $500, but,
Well,
and they're driving tractors across it full of fertilizer, so.
There was a question, however, as to why we got a recommendation from the commission for 20. I was also at that meeting, maybe David wants to fill us in, but they were very cautious about the limited budget that they had, and they weren't sure
I think
what
part,
we would approve.
part of that came from the fact that the other budgets, the numbers that were deficient were so large that they didn't want to
Right.
jump in there, and perhaps not understanding what it would take to get
Right.
to the end,
I don't
And-
think,
to get to the level that we want to get to. So-
If
I
I
don't
could
think-
just say this, if it would give you any sense of comfort, WSN isn't going to complete a design if we go through some public informational meetings and all of a sudden, we know that a box culvert just isn't going to fly. We're not going to force the city to accept a design from us out to $34,000 or $38,000. We'll stop, we'll regroup, and readdress.
thank you, Mr. Reese.
Okay?
We have nothing in here for a major road project, is that correct?
That's right.
All right, so what we do have, however, is a Manhattan Beach Boulevard or road patch down near the Manhattan Beach Hotel. Personally, I don't understand why we have to go through the design-build process on this one. To me, it's a pretty grand patch. Talk to that issue, David.
Well, the council, just for the council's information, the city had WSN complete design on Manhattan Point Boulevard from Highway 66 all the way out to the end of the point out by Camp Knutson. And in that design, we set preliminary alignments for the road horizontally and vertically. And the part that got built was the trail from Camp Knutson to Whitefish Avenue, and just a portion of the roadway down by Camp Knutson. And that's all that got built so far. The capital improvement plan outlines segments, the remaining segments of that. And part of that is the South Landing Road and Manhattan Point Boulevard intersection area. And Public Works has been having to deal with some drainage issues down there, some ice and sedimentation and so forth over the course of the years. And it was brought out at Public Works, and Ted can come speak to this, that would be a good area to address and try to improve if there's sufficient funds in 2015, as long as it can be worked into the rest of the master plan that was, started for the whole road project. And at the Public Works Commission meeting, the commission asked us to come up with an abbreviated project that might better fit the city's budget for 2015 and look at from Highway 66 up through that intersection to see what kind of project costs we're actually looking at. So that's what we did. And we provided that information to the city today. Okay?
Mr. Mayor, if I may talk, I think that at the meeting, the discussion was basically, we don't have any money.
Yep.
And so we leaned on Ted and asked him what were the most important things that, if he could address something this year, what would they be? And you mentioned the bridge, and then he mentioned this short section going, that David's described over there on Manhattan. But at the time, we didn't have a real good idea of the cost. David has submitted some data today on the cost. I've looked at them, you haven't. I would suggest that we put this information in the next packet, because the numbers are pretty big and we aren't going to have enough money to do what's there. Even if you just try to piece in a section. We were trying to do a little bit, hopefully that if you did the rest of the road later, you wouldn't have to come back and redo that part. But looking at the numbers, in my own opinion, I think we're going to have to live with what we have and try to patch and deal with it, at least for now, or until we can have a better handle on all of the capital, so.
When I looked at the 5-year capital plan and we looked at all the roads, the one piece that was probably the worst and where the most problem we have is that piece from 66 up through South Landing there. Between the shade, the no drainage, all of the slopes washing off of it between the steep bank and then the two roads that come into it. That's the place we have the most problem, and we've put a Band-Aid upon a Band-Aid upon a Band-Aid, and it just, it doesn't work. Something needs to be done with it in the future. So that's this one place I addressed that was probably the worst out of the whole system at presently.
Thank you, Ted.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Councilmember Schrupp. We've got basically $153,000 left, and they were talking, I know the commission talked about $200,000 to $300,000, and I think that Dave had 221 or something in your update. That included the trail. What I would like to do, since David Drown stayed, and I'd like to release him because I'm assuming you've got to drive back to the cities or something tonight, just to talk briefly with the council about funding streets and what options there are. I've talked to you about it, but David's been in this business a long time, and just to give you the ideas of either what we call, and the new members probably haven't heard this, a 429 project, maybe those on the Public Works Committee have. 429 project, which is a special assessment project, or other alternatives that might be out there. And David, if you could just briefly, I hope, and then you can go home, figure out, or give the council an idea what options cities have available to them to do the kind of projects that need to be done as far as
Thank
street
you for staying
reconstruction.
here, by the way.
I'm happy to stay. And he's done a pretty good job of describing it, I think, but I'll underscore and embellish a little bit. If you want to do roads, you've got two basic options. You can accumulate cash and pay for them with cash, and I imagine to some degree you'll do some of that, okay? But for larger projects where you haven't accumulated the cash, or when projects sneak up on you and you get a little behind, so you need to do them, you need to look to using debt and pay for those projects in the future over a couple of years. State law basically gives you two approaches. The most common historically has been special assessment bonds or 429 bonds. It's bonds that you issue that can fund street projects. And the major limitation is that you do have to look at the project costs and assess benefited property owners at least 20%. So if you got $1 million project, you can borrow $1 million, but you got to pay $200,000 of it back with special assessments. Now, special assessments, very briefly, aren't like general property taxes. They are special charges that the city levies just on parcels in the community that derive a special benefit from that project. If you do a road project, typically those are properties that abut the road. Imagine if you do a bridge project, it might be properties on the island served by the bridge. But the city needs to establish that there is a direct connection to the project, and in fact, there's a benefit. And we can go down the benefit discussion if you want to, but if you sustain an assessment covering at least 20% of bond payments, you can borrow all the money you want with general obligation improvement bonds, okay? The other mechanism for borrowing money for road projects is relatively recent. It was put in law maybe 10 years ago or something like that. And those are called street reconstruction bonds. They're bonds that you can issue to reconstruct streets, and you do not have to assess them. You can pay for them if you want to 100% with property taxes or other funds of the city. But the rules are, before you do a project using that technique, one, you have to have adopted at least a 5-year plan for roadway improvements that identify, the projects that you want to do and the costs. You have to publish and hold a public hearing so that your citizens find out what this is all about. And when you close that hearing, your citizens do have 30 days to think if they want to oppose implementation of that plan. And the way they would do that would be to submit a petition opposed to implementing the plan. And Dan is correct. It would be, the number of signatories is 5% of the number of people that voted in your last general election. So it's usually not a very big number. If you do not receive opposition, you can implement the plan, which means you can borrow money to do those projects. You don't have to assess, and you can pay them off 100% with property taxes. That kind of debt does count against the city's net debt limit. There are very few kinds of debt that really apply to that limit on the amount of debt the city can have outstanding. Street reconstruction bonds are one kind of debt. That magic number is 3% of your tax base, and in this community, it's a huge number. So that will not be a practical constraint for you, okay? So those are your two debt options. If your street needs aren't that great and aren't that imminent, there's absolutely nothing wrong with putting money in your budget, accumulating it, and doing a project every few years. But most communities don't take that approach for major stuff. Most of them either use improvement bonds with assessments or reconstruction bonds, and then make those debt payments over time after the project is constructed.
Oh, if I can, if we had, we've got $188,000 or $150,000, I mean, you can issue $1 million, $1.25 million with the $150,000 debt service?
Well, my rule of thumb is you can issue, if you borrow 15-year bonds, you can issue 10 times the payment. So if you had 150 grand to spend a year and you wanted to pay it off over 15 years, you could borrow $1.5 million.
Okay.
You want to pay it off over 10 years, you're probably hovering a little over $1 million.
Okay. I just wanted to stress, it limits what your options are. Either you're changing the assessment policy and you're going to assess 20% of this reconstruction, or you're going to try to do this other method. It still commits you to payments. I mean, it commits you to property taxes that are going to make these payments. And either you're cutting, your expenses somewhere else to make room to make these payments, or you're going to raise your levy in order to do it. Now, we do have the, 100 and at least 150 now. We still got to, it's bigger than that, because that isn't, the bridge isn't an ongoing expense, from an engineering standpoint. So you got to, you got some money. If you wanted to issue bonds, let's say let's say you wanted to do it in 2016, you can accommodate that in your budgeting process next fall, and you've already got some money in it, in the budget. So, you could take your worst streets and, try to pay them off as quickly as you can. That's what I like to see.
I did take a quick look, building on some of the work that Mike did in terms of looking at what your tax levy commitment is for bonds. And you do have bond debt levies that's falling off in a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And 6 or 7 years out, most of your other debt is paid off. I think by 2023, your tax-supported debt is debt-free. That really means if you're willing to keep your tax levy for debt payments sort of at today's level, you have quite a capacity to undertake quite a few projects over the next 5 or 6 years.
But we have to wait.
Can you structure, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's just bing, it came to my head. We could structure the the debt, you could structure your payments that you can accommodate lower payments. I mean, it adds to your interest cost, obviously, but you can end load it.
Yes, you can. You can, let's say that we have bonds that get paid off in 2017, so we don't have to levy in 2018. It would be, we could look at doing a street project this year and having interest-only payments until 2017. So the impact on your budget would be very slight. You know, if you're borrowing money at 2.5%, interest is relatively low. And then in 2018, you would start to make principal and interest payments. So the levies that we're using for old debt would continue on in the same dollar amount, but be used for new debt.
No doubt.
You can capitalize interest and borrow a little extra money in a bond issue to cover the interest costs for a few years, and you don't want to go hog wild about that. But at low interest rates, the interest expense associated with using debt isn't really onerous right now.
Right.
Generally speaking, if the city has quite a number of street project needs coming up, I'd recommend, like I think I heard you early on in this meeting, to take a half a step back, try to look big picture at this thing, and look toward implementing a program where, you know, if you've got a lot of street needs, you should be looking at a 10 or 15-year planning horizon and making sure that you put in place money in your budget that covers the annual construction costs or payments on debt or a combination of the two that is relatively stable. I think you owe your taxpayers stability. One of the things they hate is the unpredictability of bouncing around levies. And you haven't really done that, but if you have major street work, taking a big picture programmatic look at that, and if you need to raise taxes, get them raised and level things out. And debt can be one component of that.
Mr. Mayor?
We have just spent the last 6 or 8 years reducing our debt, paying off our debt.
Yep.
The mistake we made was not looking ahead, not planning for additional capital expenditures. I can comment on this because I was part of it. We rolled those retired debt payments or debt service into our operating expense and just rolled on. We kept our budget pretty flat, but at the expense of not being able to finance or not wanting to finance because we didn't want to raise taxes. And that was an issue. And now we're sitting here and we've got not a lot of debt left to retire. And part of the one you saw tonight doesn't come into our coffers. It goes to another enterprise. And so we really, I believe in planning, and I think we should sit down and look at this with a magnifying glass and figure it out, factor in what kind of increases we're going to have to pay for things. In talking with our Public Works Director this week, I discovered that future diesel equipment replacement is going to cost us an extra fair chunk of change because there's some diesel emission equipment being put on it. So there's some reasons for moving this stuff up because interest rates are low and it would, you know, the offsets are here. But it's been very difficult, and I'm looking at what we've got to do, and I just think we've really got a plan. And I would be very comfortable with additional debt if we knew what we were doing and we could project it into the next 4 to 5 years. I have learned over the last few years that debt for private enterprise versus debt for public entities, whole different animal. The politics of debt financing for a private industry is you lever it against taxes and other pieces of income and so forth, and if you work it right, you know, the payment you're paying for debt is about the same as if you've gotten tax relief. Here, and we've already proven it to ourselves, if we try to save money and the next council comes in and doesn't agree with the pile of cash we've accumulated and designated, they roll it into one pile and use it for other things. It kind of blows the plan. So my point is, we probably have to use debt to obligate future councils. It's a dirty term, and I don't like it. I'm not a debt guy, okay? Ask Dan every time I talk to him. It's debt, debt, debt. But it's an issue, and we're going to have to use it. I can see that today.
Well, I
Thank
can
you.
add one point that will make you feel a little better about debt, and don't take this idea to extremes, but let's say you have a street project that you need to do now or 2 years from now. Well, you could do it now, borrow the money and pay interest expense for a couple of years. Or you could simply accumulate cash in your budget, wait a couple of years and build it in 2 years. Is the street project going to cost the same 2 years from now as it does now?
Hey, we've just had a reduction in oil costs.
Long-term, I don't see, Dave can probably address this, but
I don't
street
think it's gonna
projects
hold.
seldom get cheaper. They do this, okay?
Right, absolutely.
In my experience, construction inflation certainly keeps pace with inflation, okay? You can borrow money at 2% right now.
Yep,
You can build your project now and pay 2% interest for the next 2 years, or you can build your project 2 years from now and it'll be 2% a year more expensive.
we don't know that.
We don't, okay? My point is that for needed projects, a very strong aversion to debt sometimes causes you to postpone projects that shouldn't be postponed.
I agree.
I'm not suggesting that debt is the solution to all problems, because it's not. If you got a lot of regular street work, you ought to have significant money in your budget each year to just do it on an ongoing basis, as soon as you get ahead of the curve and do the backlog work. But debt does have its place, and I agree with the politics of it, is once the debt is in place, future councils are obligated to the debt payments.
Yep. Dirty little
Yes,
piece.
yeah, I agree with it, though.
But it took me many years to learn that.
Mr. Mayor?
Sir.
I would be in favor of more discussion on this topic sooner than later. And I don't know if it's the right way to do it, but I don't know, this has been great, this discussion, for at least me. I'm not sure we should have this type of discussion all the time here, but is there a chance that maybe I can make a motion that we start arranging workshops on this? Because we put over $500,000 in public work roads and trails this year, and then we decided not to spend the money this year. Do we just, some of the decisions that have to be made, do we just roll everything out that's on the 5-year plan? Do we, we have to come up with a plan. I agree with, you can't have this thing go from $1 million to $2 million and back to 500,000. Somehow in Dave's comment about, climates, the roads might last a little longer, but I just don't know what's the priority right now. And I think the workshop would get us closer to getting involved in the 5-year plan and refine it some more is what I'm looking for, so.
If I might add on to what Dave, I agree, having some workshops, but we have tremendous talent working here with Mike and Dan and stuff. These equipment certificates, we were short of cash, and we tasked them with, can you come up with a plan for us? And they did a great job. And I think that could be part of this, but I'd like to be more involved, like you do, with that, and if that's just a matter of sitting in with them a little more often while they're doing it. But I think these guys can, Mike knows way more about this than any of us do, and so does Dan,
Yeah, I
and
had
they
my-
can call him.
I had my pen up over here, we must be communicating. One of the things that I just made a note, what I would like you to do is have your professional staff meet and hash this out. It's hard for us to, we're teaching people.
We're not close enough to the
Yeah, we're teaching
details,
people
yeah.
how to do this stuff. Let's have us come up with a plan. You've got a month and a half, or 5 weeks, I guess, till your next meeting. We'll put it on the meeting for March 9th. We'll let you know what we've done so far, and we'll just keep this thing moving. Because you've got budgeting coming up, in July, August, September, you've got to set your levy already. So let your professional staff come up with some ideas. If we need some workshops, and we will towards middle end of the summer, then we'll do that. But have Dave and Mike and I and Ted and whoever else that we need to come in, we'll do that and we'll get back to you.
Excellent,
Does
thank
that
you.
work for you, Mr. Schripp?
Yes, that's fine.
Thanks, David.
Is item
Yeah.
4 itself an item that you and Dan and Mike were going to make some presentation? Or is that made up of A through
Yep.
E or F?
No, I think we're pretty well done. The one item we didn't talk about is the email we got from this Doug Viersba.
Cover that.
Has done I
We
think
have
he-
covered it, but we
good.
haven't.
Yeah, he has. I mean, he talks about the 429 project process, and I really appreciate the comment from a resident, and maybe we can get him involved in
Yeah.
continuing discussions in the community.
Please contact him and tell him we have need for people like this on our commissions.
So the audience can see what we're talking about. Can somebody put that on the overhead? We have an email from, I think he's a retired engineer, commenting
like it.
about how we can assess part of the projects, and that's what we're discussing here at this point.
And this is what David had mentioned. It's 4D, Mike.
I got it right here if you want.
But he talks about this,
That one's mine.
you can see it on the thing, 429. I mean, you'll see the number. It's State Statute, Chapter 429, that's what we talk about. And it's the benefit and what David Drown has just talked about. So it's a great letter, and
It supports what
I think
we've
we
been
already
discussing.
we already sent one back to him appreciating his comments. I think I'd ask that be done, so.
If I might, Mr. Mayor, I think,
We're done with 4.
if I might, on the Public Works Commission, we're actually short of help in getting people to, on
Well, we
those,
can work
on that
on that
committee.
one.
So an invite for this guy maybe to join that commission?
Are we still short people on the
Yes,
Public
we do
Works
need-
Commission?
yes.
Oh, yes, we are.
Yep.
I think we're going to, are we not advertising for people for the commission? We're supposed to be. Mr.
Have
Administrator?
no clue.
Motion to spend money to,
Will you guys put an ad out for volunteers for the Public Works Commission? I think we can get them.
We can do that.
Or you can put it on the internet, or do you want to spend money
No,
doing it?
put it in the paper. Put it in the local paper. We want residents to see it.
If you want an ad, we'll need a motion if you want to add, you're going to spend
I'll
some
make a
money.
motion. Do we
I'll
get a
second it. What is it?
Thank you, Mark.
The ad is what, 35, 40 bucks? So is that- Something like that?
I don't know how
Yeah.
much it costs. It's not going
minimal.
to cost much.
Okay.
We just want to make sure we're authorized to do it.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Mr. Mayor, can I just take a minute to go back to 4?
Sure.
B.
B.
I think we need to leave some definitive answer for the Manhattan Point discussion.
You asked that we come up with a more comprehensive plan before we take any action on that. Did you want to change your recommendation? That was what I understood.
Is that
We
what I
weren't going to
said?
move on it until we understood what we were
No, that's
doing
kind
with
of, that's one where the cost was very high.
it. Yep.
And so we'll let the group decide, Dan's group, let them go through the revised capital plan. All right.
Right.
Just want to make sure.
That one's been postponed to another meeting. Ted's recommendation for purchase of a 2015, I believe it's three-quarter ton pickup truck, GMC. Mr. Nelson, you've had comments on this?
I did, and then I had an understanding that they are in need of they weren't replacing the pickup truck because of 100,000 miles, they were replacing it because they needed a truck up at Park and Rec, because that truck is old and is really bad. So,
Are you all right with
once you
this?
kind of know where it's going, then you get a better understanding. I just wanted to know that we weren't replacing it just because it had 100,000 miles on it. It just was a better way to shift vehicles.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments? Motion.
I'll make a motion to move ahead with the purchase of the 2015 GMC Sierra 2500 truck as outlined by Ted in his January 8th, 2015 letter.
Need a second?
I'll second.
Peacock, second. Motion by Schrupp. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oh, pay equity report, Mike Lannes.
Yeah, in your council packet is a memo requesting a motion to approve the pay equity report. And what the pay equity report is, it's a report that's filed every 3 years. Your last report was filed for the year ended 2011, due January 31st of January 2012. And real quickly, what pay equity is it's a process that governments go through to make sure that they're in compliance with certain rules and regulations on how they pay people and how much they're paid for like positions, whether it be male or female, and who holds those positions and how they're paid. Now, if you remember the last time this report was filed, which obviously was before my time, you looked a lot different than you do today. If you remember, in 2012, administration looked different. There were some changes made in 2012. In 2013, there were some changes made to planning and zoning. In 2014, there were some changes made to the phone company. So when I started this process back in December, I thought, I know we're in pay equity compliance, but how can I prove it? And so what you do, we ended up with, back in 2011, there were roughly 32 positions that were rated and tagged and had schedules to them, and either you were filling a position or had a person in that position. Now, the report looks at what do you look like at December 31st of 2014, which I just mentioned is drastically different. So I called Pay Equity and said, look, I'm seeing a problem with this. How do I make sure that we're in compliance? And so I had conversations over the last few weeks with the folks at Pay Equity, and their guidance was, you know, we're really interested in what you're going to look like at year end and how you propose to look like going forward. So we went from 32 positions down to 20 roughly, and we ran some reports and I explained the differences to them. And so they were fine with our salary ranges and job ratings and how we're paying people. So the short story is we're in compliance with the pay equity rules. The good news is we don't have to go through this again for another 3 years. So my recommendation is to approve the pay equity report as presented in your packet. If you do want to learn more about it, I have all kinds of information on it that we can take offline and have a lot of interesting discussions on what it means. We can talk about the 4 basic statistical tests, and then we can go into all the details of as deep as you want. But the good news is we're in compliance, so I request a motion to approve the report.
I'll make the motion to approve the pay equity report.
I'll second it.
Motion by Wessel, second by Nelson. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
Mr. Kevin Larson, Cross Lake Communications.
Good evening, Mayor, Councilman. This morning, we had our monthly advisory board meeting and covered a lot of topics. But one of the things that we mentioned at the last city council meeting was that we'd like to come before you and ask for approval for cable rate increases up to certain numbers, which would give us the opportunity because we need your approval, and then we need to let the consumer know 30 days in advance before any cable TV price increases. And so, since you weren't going to have a meeting in February, we sped up this process a little bit to go before the advisory board this month. We have not chosen yet when we're going to increase the cable prices, because we want to develop, right now you have packages. You have a basic package, expanded package, and digital package. But down at CTC, we do a lot of bundling. That's different than packages. We bundle services together to create packages of TV, internet, and telephone. And therefore, you can create more options for the consumer because of
to try to control rates, and it gives them better control over deciding what they want to buy and how much they want to buy. So you have a memo in front of you, and it recaps over the past year some of the rate increases from those programmers that have gone up over the past year. Viacom went up 34%, Discovery went up 8%. We just got finished with all the retransmission agreements for the affiliates like the WCCO, KARE 11s, and those. And they went up 69%, as I reported earlier in the month. The actual increase in programming costs for these for the basic cable service is about $3.39. Expanded basic is $7.25, and digital service is $10.21. However, tonight, all we're asking is that you give us the authority to use numbers of $3.50 for basic, $7.50 for expanded, and $10.50 for digital. Now, that's not saying we're actually going to go up, but it gives us the opportunity to massage bundles and create more packages for the consumer. But those numbers need to be, we need to raise cable rates in order to just hold our own against the increase of the product that we're buying and redistributing. This is how much the cost is going up. So tonight, the advisory board, or excuse me, this morning, the advisory board voted to recommend to you to approve these cable rate prices.
Kevin, would you disclose what the current rates are for those same packages along with the increase? I mean, before the increase?
I do not have that data with me tonight.
They're roughly what percentage?
Are you saying what is the percentage of?
In other words-
Oh, okay, about
Basic was and will now be.
basic, that's about a 10% increase
Yeah, that's-
on the basic, yeah.
Thank you.
I apologize, we did discuss that this morning. So we're in that 10 to 12% increase.
Okay, thank you.
It's, and anyone watching this on TV and anybody in the audience, this is the toughest part of this product. We are basically held hostage when we do this. But it's the cost of the product, and we have to pass it on. This doesn't mean that we're going to be making more money. We're just barely holding our own against the expenses of it. So the advisory board recommended approval of this.
This is the closest thing to blackmail that we'll probably ever experience here with City of Crosslake.
And
I'm
down-
sorry to say it that way, but
and down where I worked
it
in
is.
Brainerd, CTC too.
this is comparable to what you experienced at CTC. is that not
Absolutely,
right?
yes.
Yes.
Yep. And it's comparable for the last 20 years. I mean, I shouldn't say that because it's getting worse now, like I reported this morning at the advisory board. It's getting, the speed and the amount of increases you're getting is growing faster than it used to. But it's always been this way.
I make a motion that we accept their request to increase the amounts given.
Up to, but not exceeding.
Up to, but that's how, yeah, it's
Yeah.
written as up to but not exceeding. He's stated that it won't be any more than that. If they get successful with this bundling, it could be a little bit less, but it will not exceed that. That's the way it's put in here. And
Motion
it
by
was
Nelson
accepted
to-
unanimously. I just want to mention it was a unanimous by your commission today.
I'll second.
Motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I will.
Second by Wessels.
May I add to Brad's comments, it was unanimous after lengthy discussion.
No editorializing now. It was a lengthy discussion. Any discussion on this? Other than lengthy discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Kevin. We have reached a possible settlement with an ex-employee. I will ask Dan Vogt to comment on it, please.
Yeah, this possible settlement concerns the city and Paul Hogue, the former general manager. The settlement has been in negotiations now for several months between the city's attorney that we use for labor relations, Steve Fecker, and also his assistant, Jessica Durbin. And we've been dealing with Mr. Hogue's attorney on the other end. There was a threatened litigation, a complaint had been drafted, and the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust had also been contacted and been involved in this process. The recommendation is to approve the proposed settlement, subject to Mr. Hoag signing the agreement, and then there's also a 15-day timeline in that agreement that he has that he can rescind the approval. So at this point, it's to approve the proposal and subject to Mr. Hoag's approval, and then the 15-day rescission period that he has as well.
That's the ex-employee's option of buyer's remorse. He can rescind his acceptance for a period of
15 days.
15 days. So we'll be able to announce the finality of this at the March meeting. Anything else?
If I could have a motion at least approving the proposal that we've got, that we have so far.
Also move.
I'll second.
Second, Hecox. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's, I will disclose to you that it's fair and a good settlement. We have another one here, a group transient merchant permit by the Cross Lake Chamber for the St. Patty's Day celebration. Street vendors and the works. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Motion Schrupp, second.
I'll second.
Second Hecox, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I don't understand what item 10 is. Maybe Mr. Vogt can
Yeah, if
clue me in.
If I can, item 10, each year when we get our insurance renewal from the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, they ask us the question on whether or not we want to waive the limits that are established by statute or not. Normally, and in all the experience I have had, the city does not waive the statutory limit. The statutory limit is $1.5 million, and I don't know why you'd want to waive that limit, which means you could get sued for more and potentially have higher claims against you. I suppose if you had stop-loss insurance above that. But the recommendation is that the city does not waive the monetary limits that are established by statute for the municipal tort liability.
So the limits stand at?
The limits stand at, it's like $1.5 million.
Okay. Any other comments? Motion? I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Second Wessels. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Bills for approval. Oh, it's interesting. I noticed tonight there's some, due to the short period of this interval of meetings, we didn't have a consent agenda. Not enough stuff. Bills for approval.
I'll move, we approve.
I'll second.
Motion Wessels, second Nelson. Discussion?
If I can, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to note for the record and include it in the minutes, you don't have a meeting now for another 5 weeks. March 9th is your next meeting. And there are occasions when we have to pay bills to avoid penalties. I just want to make sure that you know that we're going to be doing that. So on your next bills, you're going to see that probably in one of the columns it says date paid. So we'll only pay the bills that we have to pay to avoid penalties. Otherwise, we like to get those in front of you before we make payments on our end, so.
Let's first of all, I'd like that in two motions. Let's first of all approve the bills for approval totaling, I'm not sure what that says. Is that total of
Yeah, if I-
$5,900?
If I can, I just wanted to.
We'll approve the other one.
Yeah, I don't need that in the form of a motion. I just wanted to put it in, just have it in the minutes. If you want to do it in a motion form, you're fine to do that. I just wanted to make sure that the minutes said that.
How much money do you plan to spend
You know,
without approval?
I'm not sure. Certainly, if you want to do put it in the minutes or do a motion, that's fine.
I think it should be.
Okay.
So this one is only $5,900, is that it?
No, plus the other ones.
In round numbers? Where's the other one?
53,000 plus 5,900.
You gotta flip it over. Back page.
Flip it.
Right.
You didn't get that one?
Item 11 in your packet.
Anyway, so it's totaling what?
There you go.
I'm sorry.
59,000
59, about $59,000.
plus or minus.
Motion to approve. We got one?
Yeah, second.
Already had it.
Okay. Who's the motion by me?
Me. And
Oh.
then second.
Wessels and Nelson. All in favor?
Aye.
Since we have an extended period of time between meetings, we need a motion to pre-approve some anticipated necessary expenditures. Probably, we need an estimate of what you guys think it will be.
No clue. I mean, we could, it could be a small amount, it could be a big amount. If Ted's got a
big
piece of
amount?
equipment that he purchased for the sewer plant, which we know he did, in the amount of 20-some thousand bucks, and they require a 30-day payment, we may have to pay that.
100, 200, how much do you
Oh, it
want?
wouldn't be that much. I mean,
Come on.
have no clue.
Reach back.
I would make that motion anticipating an amount not to exceed $200,000.
I like that.
Hey, maybe this will die for lack of a second, huh?
If that said piece of equipment did come in, it's something that's already been discussed and
Yeah.
budgeted
Yeah,
for.
that's.
It's just a question of when it's actually arriving.
It's going to be normal expenses,
Right.
but they may have a timeline on them, so we just want to pay them before we get penalized.
We anticipate that will happen. Just as a policy, should we say okay? I'll rescind my motion.
But, I mean, we've done that in the past. I mean, we've made payments. You see that on some of these, you'll see
Yeah.
it date paid. so
Yeah, there's
we
a
just
few of
wanted
them
to
on
let you
here right
know.
now, paid.
We just wanted to let you know if there's a whole pile of them, you knew about it and you knew why.
As a policy, I see no problem with that. I just flipped her over. Where are we?
12.
12.
Minutes.
12. Oh. We need approval of the last council meeting's minutes for January 12th.
I'll make that motion that we approve.
I'll second.
Motion Schrupp, second Wessels. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sorry to make such a fuss about paying money. Ted, fences around retention ponds. This could be
Capital item.
difficult.
Mr. Mayor, I contacted the county and asked them. Everything that was done on the County Road 3 project, that was, the state funding that paid for that. Everything the county did was reviewed by the state and was approved by the state. The county has no intention of fencing any ponds because all the slopes and everything meet the standards. So at this time, there is no intention of fencing anything. One of the private landowners where one of those ponds sits was going to fence one himself, but everything else, as far as the county is aware of, is not going to be fenced.
Interesting comments from the council. We probably should fence the lakes too, right? I mean, they are another form. I thought about this for a while, and the problem is, we as a church denied the city for putting retention ponds on an easement on our property for this very liability. We didn't want to get into it. So I don't know what the answer is. Who's liable for it?
I don't know, I didn't ask that question. I just asked about the fencing. Most of it was in the county right away. One of them is on private property and one of them's on DNR property.
Is it the private property owner that wants to fence the one?
It sounded like the private property owner, when the county initially talked to him about it, was going to fence his. But that's, whether he's going to or not, I'm not sure. That was his intent with the county, but
I'd like to see us just table this and indefinitely and keep an eye on it. I would like to know from the county or the county attorney if we have an issue with one of these? Who's responsible?
I suppose anything that happened in the county right away would be the county's responsibility or the DNR.
I would assume that, too.
That's a question for the lawyer. You're
Okay.
getting over my head here, so,
We'll ask him another time. Thank you, Ted.
thank you.
Oh, any other business?
None here.
Any? You know, I have proposed to hold town hall meetings, but I have received no requests. I've received no volunteers to moderate it. There are many forms we can use. I don't know that it made it into last month's minutes, but if anyone would like a town hall meeting or a venue to vent, we are willing to conduct town hall meetings in advance of a regular council meeting anytime, so let us know. Is that okay? Are you all right with that?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.